Nation in Conversation, in proud partnership with Senves, Bayer, Engen, Nedbank, AFGRI, Grain SA and John Deere, in association with Hinterland and Isuzu.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to this panel. My name is Nick Binedell, and I've been asked to host this session this morning. Welcome to all of you and all the viewers. It's going to be an interesting discussion, I hope. We've got an interesting panel that I'd like to introduce. I think many of you know Yanni de Villiers, CEO of Grain South Africa. Linda Semela, who's from ABSA, a well-known banking participant in agriculture. Rudy Dix, who's the Deputy Director General in the Department of Planning, Monitoring and Evaluation, who at this time is playing a very key role in taking forward plans to the new administration that will come into being. And lastly, on my right, well-known person, John Purchase from Agribiz. So welcome to all of you. This discussion is really about how do we go forward from here. I'm told there's a good atmosphere this year, that last year was a little tougher, and that we're now really looking forward to an era in which we can make things happen faster. And we've got to deal with many issues, but at least the elections are behind us, and soon a government will be established, and we'll start working harder at getting the sector to work with its key stakeholders, including government. I'm going to start with you if I can, Rudy.
No.
Not just to put you on the hot spot, but because we've been working together in a project called the Public-Private Growth Initiative, and you play a key role in that. And I thought it might be useful for the audience just to hear about how you see it and where you think it's got to and what's next.
Absolutely. Thanks, Nick. Look, the Public-Private Growth Initiative is unique. It's one of the first that we've established on a real partnership basis between government and the private sector to look at how we can collectively, grow the South African economy, how we can get investment going. But the basis of the relationship, of course, is that for partnerships to develop, there are quite a bit of constraints that business had raised with government. Particularly policy constraints, infrastructure constraints, cost issues. And this has been an important area for us to be able to address. I think the PPGI is a first. It's new. I think it can only go forward on the basis of trust and collaboration. And that's how we need to build this in South Africa. And the PPGI is a good platform for that to happen.
And so what's given it impetus? What do you think is making this? You say it is something new. I'm part of it with others. I mean, there has been a very constructive relationship built in the last 15 months.
Yeah.
What is giving it that impetus from government's point of view?
I mean, firstly, the main impetus is it's driven by the president. So I think that's quite central, that it's we've not relegated it to a minister or to a official, although ministers and officials are quite critical. But the fact that the president, since 2018, when he had his State of the Nation address and talked about Tumamina, talked about everyone contributing, let's lend a hand. I think this is him, walking the talk, basically saying that for us to be able to grow this economy requires a strong partnership and collaboration. Government can't do this thing on their own. It requires stakeholders' participation. And so I think this is very, very important. The mere fact also, Nick, that we've gotten ministers, director generals, a lot of other different interesting parties to talk about how we grow the PPGI is very critical. So I think that's, for us, is maintaining that momentum. So it's not an event. That's very, very important. So although there may be weaknesses, although there may be challenges, remember this is a long-term partnership that we need to construct and build.
So we built in now a set of projects, and of course we've identified the private sector has brought to government what we've called inhibitors that might get in the way in all the sectors we're working in. It's obviously a broad set of issues. Now the job is to get on with, as you say, creating more policy certainty, clarifying the direction, and removing the specific things that get in the way. I think about fruit exports, I think about logistics, I think about the port. These are constraints, and we can do so much better once we start to work together. Are you confident now, because the sixth administration will take the NDP and the planning work that your department's been doing, are you feeling confident there's an appetite for faster execution?
Absolutely, without a doubt. In actual fact, we've hit the ground running. the mere fact that we were able to address and deal with some of these issues before the sixth administration, before the elections, is just a commitment from government side to be able to ensure we deal with those inhibitors. Us, for example, is to ensure that we ingrain it within government policy, within the ability to be able to address it. You, of course, know that this only can happen if you specifically say what are the inhibitors for a particular sector. So if there are particular inhibitors for agriculture, what is it that we need to address? It's important that we not have a generalized discussion. And I think this is something that we've learned. What are the particular areas? Is it in relation to road? Is it in relation to ports? Is it in relation to policy regulation? Is it in relation to a number of other factors? And then, get us down to be able to address the thing. So there's a significant appetite. We have to gear our government structures, the bureaucracy to be able to address that. And I think we're on the way to doing that, Of course, I think it's important, Nick, and for our colleagues in the agricultural sector, some would be easy to get through. Quite, they just, low-hanging fruit, as one would term it. Others may take a bit of time, but at least that particular road that we need to follow is an important road. Let's get rid of those inhibitors.
So if we think back 5 years ago, and we think back to where we are now, there's a different climate and a willingness to work together.
Absolutely.
Do you think that business in this and other sectors have realized what's at stake?
Yeah.
And there's a level of urgency now that maybe wasn't there 5 years ago, and we were diverging more?
Absolutely. The nice thing about the PPGI is it's a common program. The question is, how do we grow the South African economy?
Right.
How do we get investment going?
Right.
How do we get unemployment down?
Right.
And once you, lastly also, how do we deal with transformation? And I think that's always the difficult one, right? But once you get the common agenda around growth, investment, and employment, and we say that we all need to put collectively an effort in to collaborate and get the economy going, I think that's a good start.
Lovely. Can you say it plays a key role here? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I just want to add on to this. It's almost for me like there was a big storm and we've lost the bridge across the river, and now both parties need to start working, but we all know we need this bridge. And I don't think we've seen that in the past. So for me and for the agriculture sector, I think this is a great moment where we have to start building trust, and we have to trust each other when we start crossing this bridge, that the bridge will actually be able to carry the whole sector. But we need this desperately for the agriculture sector. We've gone through terrible seasons in terms of drought. We're not sure how climate change is going to affect us. There's big things like food security, and we all know what the impact of that is, and we can see it in Africa. So for all of us, we need this bridge, and for that, we need both parties to work from both sides so that we can meet each other.
You've been involved in this project since the beginning, the PPGI. Do you see, if you think back a year ago where we were and what we were talking about is very different than now, what is the sector doing to assist build capacity?
Yeah, I think the first thing that we've done is identify which are the issues that we need to resolve right now, what are the urgent, and then to sit down with government and to find what are the issues that they have and how can we find common ground, because the moment we've got common ground, we can start building this bridge from both sides simultaneously. And I think for me that was the sort of the key, but there's an attitude change on both sides, and I think that for me is the thing that I want to bank on.
And what kind of things need to take the design of that bridge off the drawing board to actually build it? What stage of construction do you think we're under?
Yeah, I think if I look at it, from a grain sector perspective, we have seen some land reform happening, but it is not successful, and there's a political incentive, but there's also economic incentive that we need to sort out. But these guys don't have access to finance, and we need to sit down with government and say, how do we resolve that? And I think this is one of the things that we sit down. And I love the story of Rudy coming in here and saying he had a puncture and there was a pothole and all these things. These are the issues in agriculture. We need to sort that out, and we need to get him to understand how difficult it is to get the products to the market and how difficult it is in some instances to get the inputs to the farmers. We've developed all these nice technologies, but the inputs don't get to the farmers in the deep rural areas because there's no roads and infrastructure.
I've been amazed in the little time I've had in the last 4 or 5 years to understand this sector commercially, and really have been amazed by the potential. But of course, it's not inclusive enough yet.
Yeah.
I'd be very interested in your view from the bank. How do you see investment in farming in the future?
If you would allow me, Nick, I would like to start back on the bridges
Sure.
and the building blocks. The interesting thing is we've had these building blocks for years. They're not new. We have a PPP Act, I think, and then PPP framework. We have, for research, we've got the National Agricultural Research Framework. we sort of always met every now and again. And to me, that would have addressed a whole lot of the gaps in the sector. But unfortunately, to your point, we develop these things and then we park them and we don't use them. For extension services, we've got the multi-plural extension service policy within DAF. Again, to me, it's a perfect model to use to draw in from the sector, from your commodity associations, from input providers who have the knowledge and expertise to provide that extension services. But we have not used it, so we have not drawn in it. For financing, we've also got a framework, a policy framework that we developed with Land Bank and DAF for financing developing sector, bringing in the partners like the commercial banks and so on. Again, to the point that has been made, we have the building blocks, but we have not dusted them off our shelves and used it. So for me, it's going back to what we've been talking about and planning it and actually putting it into implementation. So for us as commercial banks, especially in terms of financing the developing sector, we need partners to do it. We cannot do it alone, and we've always said that. Because for one, we need to understand that client. What is their skill? What is their history of production? Do they understand what they do? We need transparency and so on. And those are the things we're not able to implement on our own. So we'd need partners that can help us to do that. And I think commodity associations such as Grain SA do it perfectly well because they provide the mentorship, they enable the farmers to get into production, and then we can lend on the basis of that. And I still feel government extension can equally do it. I mean, we've got an extensive extension network, and government has in the past partnered with private sector to provide those skills against which potentially the commercial banks can lend. But unfortunately, again, we have not developed that fully well.
In terms of doing now, as opposed to talking about it, are you a little more confident than you were, say, a year ago, that in this complex set of partnerships, we're going to see action now?
Yes, I am.
What gives you that confidence?
There's already a whole lot of initiatives that are going on that give me the confidence. I think we really just need to step up. Ourselves as Absa Bank, we've already started engagements with Grain SA. We've done very little, but to me, I always believe start where you can and grow it from there. So we've already done that. There's this, the Agricultural Development Agency that we're discussing as a sector. To me, that's one block that will provide us that linkage that's missing to enable commercial lending, because we're sitting with a whole lot of farmers that are, we would say, sub-commercial in terms of commercial bank lending, because they have a whole lot of gaps in their knowledge and their skills that we cannot cover ourselves as financial institutions. But if they are developed to the point where they can access commercial lending and be able to pay it back, I think that's a big role that the Agricultural Development Agency can play.
What impact has expropriation without compensation had and likely to have on your appetite to lend?
As commercial banks, we've all participated in that discussion on expropriation without compensation. We've all provided input. And I think from an Absa perspective, at least I can speak to that, we've always said land reform has to happen in South Africa, and it has to happen in a way that enables business to continue. So we need to all work together to find those frameworks, to find those ways of doing business that will enable land reform, to happen, and also to happen in a way that enables business to carry on. That's why if you saw in our submission to Parliament, we had actually said we are committed to the establishment of a land reform fund for agriculture or for rural development, and a land reform fund for housing, because those were the two gaps that we saw. So we're willing to work with the sector and find the solutions to that. That's why you find that Absa will participate in the Agri-Development Agency discussion, for instance, because in that component, there's a funding component, and we would like to see what is the potential once the framework is up. Is there anything that the bank can contribute? Is this a platform that we can engage in, to facilitate the funding of land?
Can anyone enlarge on the Agricultural Development Agency? I think it's useful just to make sure we know what that's about.
Yeah, I think it's a great initiative. We must understand that the 5-year plan that the agricultural value chain submitted is based on the premise of inclusive growth. In other words, it has a strong development focus. We have found, and I think Langa has alluded to that, is that finance and development finance especially has been lacking in South Africa, big time in agriculture. And I think there's been a need identified that we need to create a development agency for agriculture with a strong focus on financing emerging farmers, new farmers, because that is, and creating softer loans, etc., so that projects can become bankable. I think the ADA, Agricultural Development Agency, is a strong private sector initiative. Obviously, we want to partner with government in the process, but it's an initiative from private sector to make sure that we cross that bridge, using the bridge analogy, to cross that bridge, to ensure that we far more focused on development. I think one of our biggest problems in South Africa by far is we've neglected the rural areas, and I'm talking generally. Agriculture creates the right vehicle for rural development, and I'm talking in the communal areas. I'm talking generally the rural areas, in the commercial areas as well. And if we get the right policies and the right support from government around logistics, around financing and around capacity within government departments, we can turn it around. So I think the development agency is going to be the right vehicle for doing this. It brings together the private sector partners in development in agriculture.
And are you confident, as I was asking others, that we're going to action now as opposed to talking about it?
Yeah, sure. We've even got a meeting today on that to take it further. I think and it's an initiative by ITI, in Transformation Initiative, driven by Rolf and his team. And I think it's very important that they have consulted very widely. I think they've got multiple perspectives on how this must work. I think they've taken it an arm's length away just from the agricultural politics, if I can call it that. And I think it's well positioned also with government to really become a strong mechanism to drive this development.
Let's talk a bit about skills. I mean, as I understand it, in agriculture in this country has different layers of complexity and sophistication. At the top end, we're a very sophisticated producer for exports and local food security. What are the game changers, and what is our R&D capacity like, and how are we changing the way we farm that's going to make us even more productive at lower cost and give the country food security? Maybe I'll start with you, Yanni.
Yeah, I think we're way behind there. We're lacking a lot of skills. We are not attracting the best capacity into the agriculture sector. I think there was a time when we were struggling to get agriculture in the minds of people. Maybe in a sense the drought actually helped us when people start considering where's my food coming from, and when you have to pay double the price because there's not enough food in the country, or because we haven't produced enough for that matter. But I think, Nick, at the educational level, I don't think South Africa is doing well. If we look at the World Economic Forum and all those comparatives, I think education-wise we need to fix something. But I mean, in our business, for instance, in the agricultural colleges, there's also at the moment a collapse, and there's a huge gap. And when we talk to farmers, and you need not a tractor driver, but you need a computer, somebody who knows a computer well to put the GPS thing up and to get the planters going, you need a higher skilled person. And I think there's a huge gap that we need to sort out as a sector specifically when it comes to that. I think the universities are still in place, but we need to make sure that we get the scientists going. And of course, South Africa is buying a lot of technology from overseas where there's bigger capacity, but it's costing us now. And then right at the top, when you look at leadership development, I think there we're busy doing certain things to develop our younger leaders specifically. But there's a lot of gaps in our area. And when we look at, climate change is affecting this country maybe a lot more than, let's say, the USA. Will the USA provide the capacity? I'm not so sure, sir. When you talk to them about, let's say, drought resistance, if those farmers don't need drought-resistant maize, but we need it, we are so small in their business, and those are the things that we need to sort out. And I mean, even partnerships with government to sort out some of that capacity issues.
Sure.
Really?
I mean, I think one of the problems has been, data shows, of course, that agriculture as a percentage of GDP has declined and kind of like more or less stabilized now. So with employment also. So Jan is right. I mean, I think the focus has never been. The focus has always been on how we grow manufacturing, for example, how we grow mining, for example. Other sectors have grown, in a sense, organically, tourism and others.
Services,
Yeah, absolutely. Banking services, for instance, And I think this gives us an opportune time to be able to refocus on agriculture, and that's very, very important. Agriculture, of course, John's point is right. Agriculture, of course, the value chain has a significant multiplier. This is where our job and employment creation is going to be, if we get it right. So we can look at employment creation, target significant number of jobs that can be created, and Johnny's point about, the value chain having unskilled, semi-skilled, and skilled posts is very, very critical. I think, the PPGI gives us opportunity, and this is the thing that we've been trying to engage, for example, even with the manufacturing employees, is how do we partner? No, so how do we take the partnership from a national level, from a level where the CEOs engage with the president, to provinces, to institutions of government, to colleges. And I think this is the success of a PPGI, of a collaboration, where you'd want to see Grain SA or the employers that are engaged in the sector partner with the colleges to ensure that the skills that they churn out, quality of the skills, the throughput rates, the type of skills is what the industry requires. That's how that is. Government can't do it on its own. We know that. The constraints we face.
In a partnership, the striking thing about what makes a partnership work is that each element of the partnership understands the needs of the other and doesn't just go for their own. Because the system will only work when all the pieces collaborate. And what I'm hearing, and what I think you are all suggesting, is we're in the neighborhood, we're in the room. And I'm very keen, as I'm sure everybody is, under the pressure we're under and the potential you've just referred to, because there's tremendous more potential for farming, both in terms of uplifting farmers, but also in this very scientific, commercial part of farming where we've got such strength, is the time is for everyone to realize everybody needs everybody, and not just what are they going to take out, but what are they going to put in. Because the whole system only works if everyone puts in a bit more than just their own interests. Are you suggesting as a group, and I'm interested in anyone responding to this, that South Africans have matured to the point in agriculture that we realize this thing? We need each other. Government has to play a role. The associations like Grain SA and the fruit exporters all have to play a role. The development agencies, the universities, and then the farmers themselves have to begin to share their knowledge and expertise if we're going to uplift the next generation. You are saying to this audience that you think we're in the launch pad, we're ready.
Yeah, perhaps I can kick off. I think there's a realization that the trajectory that we've been on in the last 5 or 9 years, let's talk about the 9 years, has been downwards. We have to change that trajectory economically wise, but it's not just economically wise, it's also in our sector. And we have to create a more sustainable future. And I think we've all realized if we can't work together between government and between different sectors, even in the value chain, while there's competition in the value chain, we also need competition and cooperation to make sure that our value chains are competitive globally. So I think we've moved into space that we haven't really had previously. With all due respect, business was called the enemy, even by state institutions. I sat in meetings at the NEDLAC summit with Jabu Mabuza. The president of BUSA asked, stop calling us the enemy. That was the interaction. That was the breaking of that bridge.
And vice versa. We regarded government.
So I think we're totally in a new trajectory, perhaps coming out of the Tumamina approach that the president followed. And I think that has changed the ball game for us. But now we all have to be good bona fide partners in this partnership. The president also said to us in our engagement with him, he said, let's create true partnerships. And I think that outreach is actually where we're going to now. But now we've got to be good partners and we've got to make it work. I think the plans are in place now. Now we've got to start delivering.
What would you say to the cynics and the doubters who say we've seen so many policy initiatives over the last 20 years, here's just another one?
No, I think what I liked, we were very involved in the Job Summit as well. And you can easily say these are talk shops. I think what we've done now with the Job Summit, and this will also happen with the 5-year plans that we've submitted to DPME, is, and I like the approach from DPME. The DG, Rudy and team, clearly what we've got now is we've got a great matrix, we've got accountability, who's going to be accountable for the certain targets, they're meeting regularly to make sure that those targets are being met. So it's not a once-off talk shop, just to tick the box in terms of say there's a policy or there's an action. And I think this is the first time that we're bringing the accountability issue into South Africa. We have not, our accountability systems in South Africa have not been good enough. And DPME, I think, have changed focus on that as well, if I may say so, really. And I think with that cooperation between us, we can not just tick boxes, we can move with implementation.
Rudy, are you comfortable that in government, because a lot of these sectors we look at in PPGI, they're a sector that's got a core ministry, and then there are lots of other departments that have to make the whole thing happen.
Absolutely.
So Home Affairs and Tourism Visas as an obvious example. Are you satisfied that there's an energy to collaborate within government?
Absolutely. Remember also, once the president is sworn in, there's a new announcement for a new cabinet.
Right.
I think the ruling party has already given an indication that what we want to look at is much greater coherence
Right.
amongst departments. Currently, there are 33 departments. There are some indications that the number of departments will be reduced. Be that as it may, that's a political decision, and the president would have to make that decision. But that only bodes well, right? I mean, it helps us to be able to coordinate, get greater coherence in interdepartmental cooperation, because that's critical. And that's, I think, largely been some of the challenges, that we have too many cooks, as to say.
Right.
You have to bring in different departments and different institutions to be able to fix a particular problem. So yes, I think that we're on the right track, right? We're on that. I mean, just government speak, for instance. Part of what we're going to do around the commitments in the Job Summit, the commitments in the Investment Conference, for instance, the commitments from the PPGI, is to cascade this into government speak. So it's cascading it into what we refer to as strategic plans, right? And annual performance plans. So that's very, very important. So that's the
mandates.
kind of commitment.
They become
Absolutely.
Mandates to ministers
and it has, for instance, budget allocated to it. So if there are particular budgets or commitments, and APPs and strat plans, of course, constitutionally required. So you present them to Parliament and say, this is what we have to do to be able to deliver on our mandate as a department. And that's something that I think that we've never done. So in a sense, what we've done previously, we sit and engage with business, and we say, yeah, we commit. Never cascaded into the real program.
Operational execution.
Yes. And I think this is something which is very, very different, and we're hoping to say. But Nick, I mean,
So just before you go on, I just want to add one thing to this. But then you need a capable state. It's capable of coordinating, but it's got to be capable of executing. And I mean, forgive me for saying this, but as I look at government as a whole, we have a lot to upgrade in just the simple capability of the state. There are blockages, there are logistical problems, there are SOE problems, and these are very real problems that an iron fist is going to have to ensure performance.
Absolutely.
In the private sector, you don't perform, you lose your job.
Yep.
We're not seeing that accountability enough in the state.
I think
Is that fair?
Absolutely. I think your real concerns. I think the point is that we acknowledge this as a state. The president acknowledges this. He's made it public in your engagements with the CEOs. He said it. We are not going to allow the situation to continue, where there are no-brainers that can be fixed. That doesn't require any resources, but creates hindrances for investment, for instance. So yes, it's the point is, Nick. I mean, I think it's a process, right? So we want to fix, we want to ensure efficiency, we want to ensure better coordination, better partnerships, and I think this is something that we're on the road. The president has laid down the rules, right? I mean, I think that's very important. So he's given us the rules and says, we are delivering, right? We have to ensure that we get investment going. We have to ensure that we get growth going.
Sure. And of course, what we've got with this president is a person who's had such wide experience in his life between politics, negotiations, being in government, being a business person, that we're in a very, this is a window, as someone said to me once, the opportunity of a lifetime, it's got to be taken in the lifetime of the opportunity. So we now have a 5-year window in which to get this done. I want to change the direction before I engage with the audience in a minute and ask you a slightly different question. In your mind's eye, because we've been talking practically now, what has to happen and can we focus, but in your mind's eye, what might this look like in 10 years' time? If we really accelerate this, paint a picture for South Africans as to what might this look like? And let me just go through the panel and maybe start with...
I want to go back to my bridge. It is a fixed bridge. You're running up and down, and you take products from this side to that side that can't be produced this side, and things that we're doing this side that can't happen this side. So if the needs, let's say, of research and climate change issues or financing or infrastructure or the things that we need, let's say, to make the economy growing, some of those needs can be satisfied sitting with money on this side, and we need the money to run across this side. But we also need to bring the skills and the trust along with us to go to the other side. And then when we look at that, we go back and say, all right, if the agriculture sector can grow, you know, one, we've got food security, and that's what we want to maintain where we are at the moment. Two is, if we can get the growth going, we can then start creating jobs. And where do we create jobs? At the low-skilled level of which we've got huge surpluses in this country. And I think this is what I'm dreaming of, where we can resolve the food security issues, where everybody can have access to food in a way because they got a job, or because you teach them something where they can sustain themselves in a way that they do it on a commercial basis. So that's what I'm dreaming of. And lots of exports, obviously, because we can produce a surplus of food in this country.
No.
But I would love for the government officials to come across this bridge, to come and get dirty, to get punches and stuff, that they know what is that we need to fix that we can get back when they go back home.
He's going to regret telling you how to punch. Langa.
I think we should have a South African approach. Rather than me having an APSA approach, government having a government approach. Let's say, what is it that we want agriculture to achieve in 5 years' time? What growth rates are we targeting and so on? I mean, we've set ourselves a national growth rate of 5% per annum, but I don't think we really sort of mapped out how we're going to get there. So once we know those targets, then what are the resources that we have that can help us to get to that? And how do we utilize those resources to get there? And look, there's lots of them. When we were talking of skills development earlier on, and I thought each entity has a contribution to skills development according to the BEE Charter. Even your ESD is part of your development of your skills in your small enterprises and so on. So how do we unlock those resources and to Yanni's point, make them work together to achieve our targets? So I think for me, that's what we don't have as a country. We each sort of set our own little targets and sort of plow through that.
When you look at the potential, I mean, have we got a lot of arable land that is not being put to commercial use?
Yes, we do. I mean, we look at the former homelands. Typically, and we right
Ngonyama.
now,
what are we going to do about
Ngonyama? You know, the maize belt has now shifted to the Eastern Cape.
Exactly.
But I'm always looking and saying, who is going to be the first person to put down the silos there so that we can, you know, harvest the maize and put it in the silos? But those are the things we should be putting in paper and saying, this is what we would want to do. We want to unlock the grain potential in Eastern Cape. What resources do we require? And then we all make a contribution to grow the country as a whole and stop this sort of pocket-size approach to.
And you're going to come with much cheaper financing, I believe. Much, Rudy, much cheaper. Sorry, I left off one much cheaper. Rudy, what's your vision? I mean, can you see this thing?
I absolutely. I mean, I would say I want to see agriculture. Sorry, I have to bring my economics in, right? I want to see agriculture 10% contribution of GDP. Let's go to 10%, right, in 10 years' time.
From currently?
Currently, we're now about, what,
2.5%.
2.5?
Yeah, primary agriculture.
Yeah, primary agriculture, but agro-processing will be about
12.
Yeah, with the whole value chain is roughly 15%.
no, agriculture.
Primary agriculture is 2.5, yeah.
4 times bigger.
We want to get it big. Same with employment also, right? So I think that's important. But you know, these kind of like we can be ambitious and we can say this is exactly right because we have opportunities. We have opportunities to tap into the sub-region. We have opportunity to tap into the region. We have the expertise and the skills, despite what we think about ourselves and the challenges that we have. We have huge export markets that are claiming, you know, and asking us, we want your products, right? We can't get our story and act together, you know. So I think these are the kind of things that gives us the potential. What do we do to be able to fix that and use the potential of these markets to be able to go there? But 10 years from now, I want us to, you know, have a trust and collaboration. That must be just continuous. And get the trust going, you know. 10 years from now, I also want to see a sector that's significantly transformed and much more inclusive. You know, so that's I think is something that, or the difficult kind of conversations. I mean, while the PPGI sets us on a solid footing to get to where we think objectively, but I think we still have to have difficult conversations. And I think this is the nice thing. We can now have that conversation. You know, so we can
build a bit of the relationship.
So you have momentum. So let's have the difficult conversations around transformation, around land reform, you know, around trust, and you know. So yeah.
John, paint your picture 10 years out.
Yes, I'm everybody knows I'm very optimistic about agriculture. I think despite the barriers and the problems we had over 9 years, we still grew. We still accessed, we still grew our exports. We've done very well despite problems. If we can get everything right around policy certainty, support from government in various fields, and they know exactly what those fields are, where the inhibitors are that we've got to correct, because they were all in the plan. If we can get all those right, I see great opportunity for inclusive growth. My message is inclusive growth. We can bring a lot more people in. That will speak to the transformation issue. I think if we get our trade negotiations right, there are huge markets overseas that we can tap into, but then we've also got to get plant and animal health right. There are a lot of things that work coherently that we've got to get right. But I think if we can get it right for the next 10 years, we can turn the economy around. You know the figure. Our GDP per capita from 2011 to 2016 dropped from just around about $8,000 to $5,200. We lost 25%. We all became 25% poorer in South Africa on a dollar basis. We've got to turn that around. And agriculture, given the 15% in GDP on the value chain, can play a major role in that. The President has highlighted that a number of times, the importance of agriculture and the agricultural value chain. So I think there's a willingness that I've never seen before from the agribusiness community, from the farmers, from everybody to cooperate to get that growth, that inclusive growth going. So I'm very optimistic.
Fantastic. I'm going to turn to the audience now and ask you to ask the panel questions. I'll probably take 2 at a time just to help us think through them. So please give some thought to what you would like to ask. I mean, I think it's been a very optimistic panel discussion, but you're in the trenches. So what are your questions to the group that we've got with you? Who'd like to start? So there's a gentleman there, and can I get a second question, please? And over here. Please just say your name and we can respond.
I'm Peggy Spear. I'm a farmer in the Eastern Cape. I like the idea of a bridge, but what worries me at grassroots level is that the design of the bridge may be different. Somebody may be doing a kind of suspension bridge, and the other one is doing the wooden bridge. How are they going to link? I think the conversation at a national level and probably a bit provincial level may be good, but at a local level, I don't think it is going well as it should. How do you cascade it so that we ensure that we don't build castles on air and they are going to come crashing down?
Lovely. Thanks very much, Becky. Michelle?
My name is Michelle Meyer, and I'm not a farmer. I'm quite passionate about education, and there was mention of education and the lack thereof in as far as agriculture is concerned. And my question is sort of three-tiered. Firstly, I would like to know what is being done to improve not only general education in South Africa, but more specifically as far as agricultural colleges and agricultural schools are concerned. I remember when I was a learner, we had outside what is today Polokwane, there was, for instance, an agricultural school. And also our colleges, what can be done to improve education and make it more available to learners to go study agriculture? And then on to the business people, I might ask, what is being done in the schools to guide learners to decide to go and study agriculture? In the old days, we had school guidance programs. Are there any programs that go into schools and tell children, you don't only have to become a farmer, you can follow this or that job as far as farming is concerned? And my last question would be, I love the fact that Langa spoke about the South African approach, so this approach would be holistic. What is being done as far as bursaries are concerned to make it possible for learners across board to go and study agriculture? Are there any programs as far as that's concerned?
Right. Thanks very much. So let's respond to those two. Who would like to start? Yanni, I see.
Let me start with the bridge thing. When I thought about this, I almost thought we have built the last 20 years maybe the bridge in this direction, and the government was doing it in this direction, and now we found each other sort of halfway in the middle, and we need to make some maneuver here to get something going. So I think for us as an organization representing farmers, we have now engaged with government to find that we actually start aligning our plans, that we talk the same thing and that we want to resolve the same thing at the same priority level. What we have done is, for instance, as an organization, is we've got 3 offices in the Eastern Cape to try and get the production going in the Eastern Cape, because we know that is in the rainfall area and the soil type that we can get 5 or 6 or 8 tons a hectare if we can teach the farmers the right technology and techniques and all of that. The problem is the farmers don't get finance because it's all communal land. Now, I can't resolve the communal land issue, and I think there's a debate around that as well. But I can sit with Rudy and we can say, private sector, here is some solution, and Longa can help with that. And then we take it to government and say, but you also need to help us here, because we're not going to resolve the issue of communal land like tomorrow. But we need to resolve the financing issue tomorrow. So for me, I think we need to take that down. In the Eastern Cape, for instance, we have taken in, I think, 14 extension officers that have just trained. We took them into our offices. We've trained them to get confidence, how to teach the farmers the modern stuff. And I'm not so sure where they were trained, but and I'm not talking to that at the moment. I said we taught them the practical stuff, how to help a farmer and how to have confidence, because otherwise the farmers will just say, Suga wena, you don't belong here, and you're too wet behind your ears. So we need to teach those guys to have confidence in doing that. And just on the what are we doing for the school kids? Grain South Africa is running a program where we teach the children, where does your hamburger and your T-shirt comes from? What careers are there in agriculture? Sometimes we find it difficult to get finance to run those programs. It's all ex-teachers that we sent into the deep rural areas to teach them these things so that these guys can actually consider agriculture. We do it for the grade 9ers so that they can consider their final year subjects based on the information. And we've got great successes about that. But it's obviously an expensive exercise to do all of that, and sometimes we find it difficult to get that. And some of the other people can talk. There's a lot of bursaries, mainly focused at the postgraduate level, to make sure that they remain within agriculture. But amongst the trusts that we have in the organizations, there's quite a lot of bursaries. Is it enough? I don't think so. Last night, Lambert Botha mentioned about where's our skill pool. I always want to say export barrier removal hit squad. It's a very difficult concept, but you need people that the moment there's a ban on wool exports to China, you need to activate a hit squad that can move in with skill, take all the WTO rules and the trade agreements and sort it out and get it done, like in weeks, so that we can continue with the exports. Those things are things that we don't have as a country yet, and I think agriculture lacks that. And on the skill side, this is something that I feel passionate about.
I think part of Becky's question was really about, are we designing the same bridge?
Yes.
And
now I think so.
And you say now
been in
you
the
think
past.
so. And he's not questioning it, he's asking. Yeah.
Yeah, I think also to Becky's question, I think the point he's also making, and I'd like to get Rudy's input on this, is while we're making the good plans at the top, and we really are, there's a meeting of minds and a meeting of plans, etc. We know that governance at third-tier government is a massive problem in South Africa, and I think that is the point he's making. And we really need to address third-tier governments, especially in the rural areas, because that's where you have huge failures of just paying electricity bills. Water supply becomes a huge issue in these areas. It absolutely hampers investment, and especially in the agribusiness sector. So I think we really need to focus at third-tier governments, COCTA, and get that governance right. So I think the plans must speak to how we get delivery at third-tier level.
So really respond to that,
Yeah.
I think.
I thought Becky's point was that too, but I thought the poignant point that he makes was that you have, at this level, a collaborative partnership. You're beginning to understand each other. And for him, he doesn't see that cascading down.
Bottom end, yes.
He
Exactly.
doesn't see that cascading down at a level
correct.
where at a farming unit,
Yes.
Yeah.
right,
The
or in a
community.
municipal area,
Yeah.
that is the kind of breach that one. And I think that's real.
Yeah.
I think that's the reality. That's the reality we face. We design good agreements.
Yes.
We have good collaboration at a central level, but we're unable to successfully cascade this down. And my point earlier on around, Michelle, about the colleges is a good example of something that I think business can partner with. Finance is another thing. The blended finance options is the ADA, for example. It's another thing where you can use state resources and leverage capital from the private sector for greater forms of investment. Phytosanitary and sanitary measures.
Yeah.
John talks about getting our products out, making sure they meet the specifications, partnerships. So these things are at the product level. They're at the point of where these things have to exit into the market space. The skills thing is quite critical, Michelle. And I think the problem with the skills thing is not a government thing. It's not a business thing. I think it's very, very important. That if there's one thing that we can get right, that is a solid partnership that we can develop and design. How do we get the colleges functioning adequately? How do we ensure that the colleges are designing and churning out the skills that we require for agriculture? That's the critical thing. It's also very difficult because as the same thing in agriculture, young people think that it's okay to go only to university, right? It's only okay to wear a suit and a tie. But they forget about the importance of blue-collar skills, engineering skills, artisanal skills.
Plumbing, electricians.
Plumbing.
Yeah.
Plumbers earn more than economists,
Yeah.
right? And so of course,
Which
young
is
people,
probably not unreasonable, actually.
absolutely, yes. Interesting stats that I picked up. But it's getting young people to understand that these kind of skills are quite critical for the economy and making it more attractive. Now, to make them more attractive requires the kind of partner, the kind of programs that Johnny them run. Going to schools, going to colleges. But for me, if I may just say,
No, please.
colleges work, right? When they are, and we've done a bit of work on this, right? Colleges work where there is an actual firm, an agricultural firm, or an industry body that actually partners with the college and say, you know what, this college doesn't churn out the skills, it doesn't have the adequate equipment, it doesn't have the qualified teachers to be able to teach, right? What can we do to support that? And what can we do to take these young people and give them the kind of experience, right? So they can go out into the market space. So that's the kind of thing that, I think Becky, that could work, in a real way. That this is the kind of stuff that we talk about where we can cascade that kind of partnership down to the most lowest denominator, which is at a college level. And we talk about a simple thing of skills and the way that we can partner together to churn out the kind of
Lovely.
skills.
So we're talking about, to bring the two questions together, on the one hand, it is about education and community and reaching out and sharing the knowledge and information systemically. And the other is about the education system. So we're talking about the third tier of government, which you're raising, and second, we're talking about the third tier of education.
Yeah.
And that's where the large number of people are potentially frustrated and unemployed. So I think those are priority areas. And most people I would talk to would say the third tier of government is very dysfunctional and very problematic and hard to reach. And we can be having all the blah, blah, blah here. That's where the rubber hits the road. How are those small towns doing? And from what I've seen about them, they're in a bad way.
Yeah.
So it's an urgent thing for government. Let me take some more questions because we're going to run short of time inevitably. And let's take two more. There's a lady over there. And can I see another hand? A big prize for the second question. Anybody? Nobody? Gentleman over there. Right, please go ahead.
Hi, I'm Danine Erasmus from Farmers Weekly. I think this governance issue, I think we're giving the national departments too much credit to imply that the problem doesn't start there, that things sort of unravel at ground level, especially when we look at the departments of agriculture and rural development. I think the leadership within those departments and the communication between those departments are very poor, to the extent that a program such as agri-parks, just nobody really knows who's in charge of what, so nothing happens. So now Cyril Ramaphosa, our president, has got the opportunity now to restructure his cabinet. So I would like to know from all the panel members, how do you think this restructuring should affect those two departments at an administrative ministerial level? Is there a chance to structure those departments better?
Very good. And the second question?
Yes, my name is Johan van der Walt. This morning when I drove into Nampo, excited as I was to get here, the first thing I saw was people looking for work. And that's a big problem all over South Africa. I know this is a tall order, but can't we take the politics out of agriculture? And then everybody wants to help. Everybody wants to see our economy grows. But as long as politics is involved and you get accused of something or this or that, everybody sits back, or a lot of people rather sit back than join in. I know there's no short answer, but that's, according to me, the biggest problem.
I'm very interested in your question to see what the panel say. I fear that politics is a part of life. I think the question more is how do we de-emphasize it more and get to the economics of making the country work.
But let me take a shot of what Johan was asking there. I think leadership can make a difference in terms of building trust. We can start fixing, let's say, and try to fix the unemployment. And I mean, for Nampo is actually providing for a lot of casuals an opportunity, maybe a once a year thing that they can actually come and do something here. But I think, you know, somewhere we haven't invested enough in terms of the leadership saying, I will be the least, I will be changing my part of the bridge to actually align to yours. And maybe if you can do it from your leadership side a little bit, and then we can get this thing going. But if we don't trust each other, we're going to find it very difficult. And how, you asked earlier the question, how are we going to prove to the farmers out there or the value chain out there that we actually not just talking here? The fruit will do it, sir. Sure. If we can just hang in there long enough to make something work and to say, all right, we have jointly done this thing, here's the delivery, now we're going to try the next pillar to put the next pillar in so that this bridge get more stable. That, I think, we need the leadership to do that, and I think this is what we're trying to teach young people like Johan when he attends the Grain Academy, that this is how we're going to resolve the country. And maybe we must keep our eyes on the ball and not on the politics. Resolve the issues, get the pillars in, and make sure that the bridge can hang on.
Get the fruit to the port.
As I believe.
Yeah.
Can I respond to Deneen's question?
Please.
I think, Deneen, I think the point that you make is absolutely right. Our position is we'd like to see amalgamation of a number of departments, but DRDLR and DAF is definitely one. Certainly, there have been grey areas of overlap. They've been dysfunctional because of the nearly infighting between departments around turf wars, if you can call it that. I think if I was the president, I would certainly merge the two departments, get strong leadership in there. I am quite critical of the way in the past ministers of agriculture have been designated. We haven't really had people that know agriculture that well at that level. Sometimes one gets the feeling agriculture is a minor ministry and politicians just get parked there for favors, etc., not really having the focus with people that know agriculture and to help drive agriculture, and in land reform and rural development that goes with it. I'm a strong believer agriculture must drive rural development, and we must get that focus right. So I think if we can get that right. But there's also the issue of economic ministries. There's DTI, there's EDD, and there's small business. And I think there again, there's been working at cross purposes in some of those departments, and that also affects agriculture, because agriculture is a business, and we must also get that more focused and more comprehensive, and I think there are moves to do that at the moment. But we will be interested to see the new cabinet and what the new ministries are going to look like.
And we'll know soon enough, because the way you structure the top affects everything down the system.
Absolutely.
And decreases the coordination problems and allows you to move faster.
I was going to comment as well on Deneen's question. I think initially when the Department of Rural Development and Land Reform was set up, it was supposed to coordinate rural development. I remember they had these local development nodes, I think 27 that they identified. So if the issue is education, health, agriculture, you bring in the line ministries to address that problem. But unfortunately, I think much as we talk about PPP, government-to-government collaboration is also quite weak in this country, and something needs to be done about that. So for me, agriculture needs to lead agricultural development from the other line ministries.
But it needs to do so in a transformative, inclusive manner that lifts up farming to make it more productive. Really, last thought from you.
No, absolutely. I mean, I think it's quite important. But remember, if you take the entire agricultural value chain, it's not only going to be rural development and agriculture, it's going to be DTI,
Yeah,
small
sure.
businesses,
Yeah.
and EDD in its current configuration.
Yes.
It will probably most likely change. The trick for us is getting that coordination properly. So we don't have a silo approach, and I think this is the frustration, I think, from a lot of the industry guys, is that you have to run from one department to another department to another department. And I think I think the point that John and Yanni and them have made in the engagement is how can DPME play a better role in
Yes.
policy coordination
Absolutely.
and interdepartmental coordination, so we address the kind of entire value chain, because it's roads.
Yeah.
So we have to deal with the Department of Transport, ports. We have to deal with Transnet and the department. And I think this is the challenge that I suppose, Deline, what you're saying, how we can we have a better functioning government, and I think this is something that I think the president has made it very clearly. Yes, he wants a better functioning government, wants better coordination. Politics is politics. Man. We can't avoid this. But what is nice about this discussion? So let me just give you a little bit of. I mean, we're at a level of discussing products, and how do we enhance a particular product getting on. So what hinders, for example, John's point around citrus, for example. So part of the recommendations in the PPGI, let's just use agriculture, is citrus, and so of course in our engagement with John says. We want to increase export. We want to become the biggest exporter. Spain is now currently the biggest exporter, right? In 5 years' time, we want to be the biggest exporter. This is how we're going to do it from the citrus sector, but we need you to play this kind of particular role. So that takes the politics out. That's nothing about politics. That's about getting a product out,
Getting the system to work.
and and getting the system to work. Absolutely. So I suppose, you can't avoid the politics, but the kind of engagement is looking beyond the politics.
I suppose what he means is what kind of politics will allow the economy to grow. So we're coming to the end, I think, and thank you very much for taking part. Ik denk die geest is goed, maar die tijd is min. And let's get to work. So thank you very much for joining us on the panel. Please join me in thanking the panel.
Thank you. Thanks.
Nation in Conversation, in proud partnership with Senvis, Bayer, Engen, Nedbank, AFGRI, Grain SA, and John Deere, in association with Hinterland and Isuzu.